Enterprise Management 360, your main source for tech news, analysis, podcasts, and videos for the enterprise.
Hello and welcome to this Enterprise Management 360 podcast. I'm Max Curtin, the editor-in-chief here at EM360 and your host on today's podcast. So in today's episode, we're going to be delving into the exciting world of gaming. Thanks to smartphones, tablets, and new gaming technologies, the industry has evolved significantly, and so far it's showing no signs of slowing down. In fact, research is showing that nearly 70% of Americans play video games on at least one type of device. In light of the growth in gaming and innovations, we're going to explore monetization, retention, and just generally the market as a whole. So joining me today to share his thoughts on this and give us a more in-depth background is Ernesto Ongaro, data analyst at Looker, who has worked with gaming companies like Jagex, PlayStack, and Hatch Entertainment. So welcome, Ernesto, and thank you so much for joining me today.
All right. Thanks very much, Max. Excited to talk with you about the gaming industry.
Exactly.
So yeah, I wanted to start with a little story about when I was growing up and started gaming, and hopefully it fits into all this kind of nicely as a backdrop. So take you back to 1993 in Texas, summertime. I had to beg $20 from my parents to buy my first game. I rode about 30 minutes in the hot sun to this video game store, and I picked a PC game that worked on the family 386 computer. There were only like 20 titles to choose from, but I still spent probably an hour in there looking through all of them, reading the box and all that. So I got F-15 Strike Eagle 2 by Microprose, sort of like a fighter game. So yeah, went home, I installed it on this diskette, and I must have played that game for 3 years. Like that summer, it was day and night was playing that game. And then, as soon as I got home from school, I'd put in the disc and play. If you look at the developer of that game, Microprose, what did they really know about me then? At the very best, they would have a single row of data in their sales data. A game was bought cash at this store on this day. They didn't know if I even installed it or I liked it or if I was hungry for more content and would have bought a sequel to that game. So if you look at today where you can just pick up your phone and you can choose from thousands and thousands of titles across like a ton of different platforms. I could only choose from 20 titles. It was pretty easy for a particular title, even if it wasn't very good, to get some mind share. So today, to capture mind share, it's just tough business. It's really crowded.
Mobile gaming is something that has changed the way that developers can monetize on their apps, really. So what are the monetization opportunities that come with this style of gaming?
I guess with mobile, it kind of started with purchases, right? You bought the app for $2.99, you paid up front, and you reached your lifetime value straight away. And then around 2011, you could actually, Google introduced in-app purchases. You could purchase items throughout the game to maybe advance quicker. And lately, it's been kind of a mix of in-app purchases and ad-supported games where you could watch ads to advance quicker, keep playing. And there's many new models like subscriptions that are coming online. When the purchase was made up front, data didn't play a huge role there. I guess traditional like game companies didn't really care about analytics. Once the purchase was done, the lifetime of the value was realized immediately, and you could analyze your sales data, which is fairly boring, right? It's not going to move the needle much. That really all changed when games started moving towards in-app purchases. All of a sudden, we were running games the same as an e-commerce store. We have inventories of items, and they have inherent values. I actually recently heard a talk from one of our customers in the UK, PlayStack, a little story about how they soft launched a game where all the items cost the same. So everything cost exactly the same. And then after soft launch, by analyzing the popularity of each item at different stages in the player's life cycle, they priced them appropriately. The key in their success was empowering the product managers with this data directly and letting them make decisions without having to get, an analyst involved each time. And now the kind of latest is ads. You give non-paying users the option to choose the currency they want to pay with. You can pay with your time by watching an ad, or buy money by paying for an in-app purchases. They're super interesting. You don't get the same amount of money if you show an ad to a 16-year-old in a developing country as you would get if you, say, showed it to a 30-year-old in the US. So then you have this kind of like attention minute that's worth different amounts, and you're optimizing for the possibilities to monetize sort of this long tail of players that used to not monetize. But I guess the key to understanding ads is how much each ad play is giving you and if it's worth the attention of your audience. If too many ads are being played, then obviously your players don't like the game, they churn. Too few, and then you're not monetizing your company to keep afloat. So it's really a balance there. If you can't tie your acquisition cost with like what the player's doing with the ads that you're playing and any revenue that you get from in-app purchases, you'll never know the most important thing about your players, which is lifetime value. So it all really revolves around that metric of lifetime value, no matter what monetization strategy you're using. It's got to exceed the acquisition cost.
You were telling the story at the start there of, bought the first game in 93. How different is gaming now to when it was then? So the trends in the gaming industry are just coming and going constantly. And that's a great thing, don't get me wrong. It's great to see such a great evolution in such a short period of time. But what problems are designers going to face when making games in light of new trends?
The buzzword of the year is probably hyper casual. These are games with no tutorials or stories or character development. You just go straight into the gameplay. And typically they rely on ad monetization, not necessarily in-app purchases, because to get somebody to purchase something, you got to really warm them up. And hyper casual is just quick little action games. So everyone's talking about it this year. We've definitely seen an uptick at Looker of new customers in this space that are kind of focusing solely on hyper casual. The thing that's really shifting is how quickly the players come and go. The lifespan of a player in a hyper casual game is super small. I guess decisions that you make on where to acquire players for how much and the resulting lifetime value that you'll get back from them is really critical to get right. So you end up kissing a lot of frogs in this genre and tuning your engine and choosing like what titles to build. That's the part that's challenging. So hyper casual is the equivalent of day traders in finance. They have to be hugely data driven in order to make money. There's no option for them to, take these longer shots. They make these quick shots. The fascinating thing I see is how quickly companies are churning out the games. So some studios are publishing like 3 to 4 games a month, which combined with how data driven they have to be to survive creates some really unique challenges that we've seen. So I was working with a customer that's launching at that cadence, and they built this Looker model where each game has to be measured by the same definitions of the KPI. So every time they're putting a game out, it's measured exactly the same way, and they're really strict about, if it doesn't meet this criteria by this day, they pull the plug on the game. So they publish as many games as they like pull the plug on, because they know that you only get that one chance to get it right. It's just really cool to see how regimented those companies are with their data decisions once they have an analytics engine in place.
Yeah, I suppose does that stop them from kind of wasting time on certain games? They can say, okay, this is working, this isn't working.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, it could cost in the millions to launch a game, maybe not a hyper casual game, but you'd be throwing away $500,000 if you chose the wrong, title and try to launch it and put marketing spend behind it. So that's where that rigor comes in.
With the hyper casual aspect, then let's move a little bit onto the player retention aspect. So to fully understand how to hook players in and to keep them there for a long time, we know a lot of games that you can mention off the top of your head that are very successful at that. You need to have a good knowledge on the different ways that people play the games. So particularly hyper casual versus the hardcore side of things with gaming. So how can developers retain players for each of these gaming styles? And how does monetization differ between the two models?
Yeah, so you're right to kind of separate these two worlds when it comes to retention. With casual games, monetization is quick. And then for highly engaged or hardcore games, monetization happens over a long period of time. Some companies might measure their lifetime value in years, not days. So for hardcore games, the thing that we're seeing some of our advanced kind of customers do is how they manage content. To keep players interested in a title for years, you have to keep releasing new content and keep up with the demand for it. So when it comes to analytics, content is similar to what companies like BuzzFeed do to optimize what their publishers write. You have to optimize your content for your most loyal customers and then keep a steady stream of it coming. That means getting data down to those that are creating the content. So if I'm creating a new weapon, what color should it be? That shouldn't be a guess. That should really be a data-driven decision. The same way that if BuzzFeed is choosing like a headline, they're going to make a data-informed decision about what headline is probably going to be more successful for them.
Is there any kind of way at the moment in terms of from a data standpoint to see where the market is kind of leaning, more hyper casual versus hardcore, or are we talking two completely kettle of fish here?
Yeah, there are different companies with different types of goals. I think the hardcore games require a lot more longer term investment. You have to start developing a game now that'll be released in 1.5 years. So it's riskier. So you're going to see some of the larger studios kind of tackle those types of games. And then you're going to see the independent studios tackle the hyper casual games. So it's hard to know where it's going to go and what all that space in the middle. I think what we're starting to see, though, is that there's a niche for everything. You've got Fortnite has like 80 million monthly active players. So if you can come up with a game that just takes 1% of those monthly active users away from Fortnite, you have a game with 800,000 monthly active users, which wouldn't be a bad game, right? So there's plenty of space there.
Definitely. So if we continue with that kind of player retention path, then developers surely want to know what makes their users keep on coming back. That's the bread and butter at the end of the day for their kind of statistics. So how do you recommend that they kind of explore this aspect?
I think a lot of the time we look at all the different functions of a gaming company in isolation. Marketing or user acquisition folks tend to look at their spend. Developers and UX designers, they tend to look at like the game telemetry data. And then monetization managers get different reports from, ad vendors and from the different, app stores. And so these data points that they don't tell great stories as islands. If you buy a player and all you see is that you paid $2.50 as your CPI for that kind of player, that's not telling a great story. The players don't live on these islands. They live on this continuous plane of existence. So how do I recommend exploring retention? It's about asking questions that span an entire player's life cycle. And for that, you need centralized data and a data model that kind of spans all the touch points of a player. So when a marketing manager is looking at the success or failure of a campaign, they don't have just a single number to look at, which is, okay, I paid $10,000 for 1,000 players. They say, right, from the 1,000 players that I bought, so many of them went on to do this. So many of them went on to invite 5 friends. So many of them bought our other title. And you get a better picture for what that marketing spend did for you. Or if you're a developer and you put out a new item and you want to know a question like, where was this item used in the game? Was it used kind of early in like the life cycle of a player, or was it towards the end when they churned? The deeper questions are really where the retention answers live, not the kind of simplistic ones that we tend to ask because we only have these little data islands. Complete shameless plug, exactly what Looker does.
You got to get the plug in there, of course. So really, you can go from a real granular detail of every aspect of this game to help, first of all, improve the game, but also get that retention and monetization aspect in there as well.
That's right.
So if we kind of wrap up here, then the question that we always ask, and we can open this up quite wide, is what concerns do you have in relation to all of this, if any? And the second part of that, on the positive aspect, is what are you personally looking forward to in the future for gaming, analytics, and everything we've discussed today?
I guess concerns, there's this awareness in the industry that there's a lot of exploitation. The idea that just because you're an artist or you like writing code for games, that you shouldn't be given the same employment rights as somebody else, and that you're allowed to be overworked. That's obviously something that concerns me. Gaming is still a new industry, and all new industries tend to go through this period of exploitation where some of the guys out there will try to exploit people. So I guess shining a light on the issue, talking about it like we are now, has already created a wave of change in the industry. And my hope is that it continues in that direction. I guess like the media industry, there's always changing business models in gaming. And it means we're going to see a lot of companies experiment. We're going to see companies quickly rise. We're going to see companies fail. And we haven't seen the end of that. That's part of the excitement of the industry, especially now as you can back games on different online platforms that you like, and you can fund them yourself, and you can really follow that progress, and you can be part of the success or the failure. I think that's just a lot of excitement, a bit of creative destruction there. So I guess the thing that's clear is that it's going to take creative analytics to continue to chase this longer tail of players. Finding those little niches in the market to exploit is going to take experimentation, and experimentation requires rigorous whole company analytics. So I'm really just looking forward to like the industry maturing in their use of analytics, empowering everybody at a game company with the right answers to the questions that they have of their data. Stuff I'm looking forward to, the whole streaming games thing, verdict is still out, but I'm looking forward to seeing like what develops there. We have a customer in Finland called Hatch. They're an innovator in this space, and just seeing what they're doing for game monetization is really interesting. It's a sort of all-you-can-eat Netflix-like model where you pay a subscription fee and you can kind of choose from hundreds of titles to kind of play with. So, you know, as long as that's putting more money into the hands of the developers, I'm all for it. I mean, I guess the Spotify and Netflix models are still kind of rocky when it comes to, you know, making sure that everybody's paid equally for it. But
no, I 100% agree. I think the streaming aspect is the obviously next big stage of gaming. So a lot of big companies are trialing it and a lot of newer ones as well. So it's interesting to see how that dynamic is going to change. And as you're saying, analytics is going to play a major part in that aspect. So it's exciting to see where it's all going. Well, Ernesto, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on this matter. If you wouldn't just mind telling the listeners where they can go find out some more information based on what we've discussed today.
Check out looker.com. You can click on industries there and click on gaming to find other links. We have blocks. We have demos specifically made out for you guys. So come check us out.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Ernesto. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for listening to this podcast. Make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasting source from. Make sure you also head on over to em360tech.com for more interesting content like this. Thank you once again to Ernesto and Looker for taking the time to talk to us. And we'll be back soon with another EM360 podcast.
You've been listening to the EM360 podcast. For more great content, head on over to em360tech.com.